as ophthalmologists, we like to think of every little bit of vision being precious, every little visual perception being useful, and we think very much in terms of maximizing the vision that everyone's got.
Welcome back to Don't Harp On with Rob Sears, that's me. And today I'm joined by Miss Jen Anikina. Now, I was introduced to Jen via my friend Allison, who also has RP. She said that I should talk to this cataract and retina specialist. So she match made and put us together, and we've had a few chats behind the scenes. And I'm pleased to finally get it going. How are you doing?
So, hello everyone. Just to introduce myself, my name is Jen Anikina. I'm a retinal specialist. So I'm working in London and Reading, and Windsor. I work at the Royal Berkshire Trust. I am a retinal surgeon. But I also work with patients with medical retina problems and with cataract and a whole host of other eye issues. I did some research in the past in London at the UCL Institute of Ophthalmology with the team who are involved with the gene therapy trials for inherited retinal disease. So hence my interest in the topic. Thank you very much for inviting me.
You're welcome. It's nice to see you. So I have asked in Facebook groups and in Facebook Messenger groups and a WhatsApp group all about RP and questions that they would have for Jen. So what we've done is we've taken all those questions, we've put them into a list, and I think we've got 10, haven't we?
I think we've got a few for today, and then we've got another planned meeting where we're going to cover a lot of the gene therapy stuff with a colleague of mine who's a specialist in that. So watch this space.
Very exciting. Cool. So I'm not sure how many questions we've got, but we've taken quite a few of them, and I think we're going to bang through as many as Jen has got time and patience to get through. So we'll crack on. So first question is, how soon will there be a complete treatment for RP?
It's very difficult to answer. I often say, well, I wish we had a crystal ball for these things. Um, a little bit of background, I suppose. Those who suffer from RP know probably more than I do about it. But essentially, RP is a very generic term, retinitis pigmentosa. It covers a vast array of different conditions, and it affects about 1 in 3,500 individuals. So actually, it's relatively common when you think about it. And the genes that are involved in it, there have been over 100 that have been found to be implicated. And often there are multiple genetic defects in each of the genes. And so there's huge variety and huge sort of huge numbers of symptoms that patients can get. And actually, a family history, so relatives with the condition, is only present in about 50 to 60% of the population of RP patients, which means that new mutations are quite common. And sometimes it springs up out of the blue without any kind of knowledge about it in your family. Um, and it can be inherited in different ways again, so different patterns of passing it on to children. As yourself know, it can be X-linked, so passed on from via the by the mother, with the females never being affected, but actually most of it is autosomal dominant inherited or autosomal recessive, so not implicating the X genes. Now, treatment, what I've said just now gives a clue about why we haven't actually got a definitive treatment for it as yet. It's very difficult to address because there are so many genetic defects, there are so many variations that it's very difficult to target treatments to one particular thing. It's an area of very active research. There are multiple groups around the world engaged in gene therapy research, which is currently the most promising treatment modality for it. When I did my thesis in my research, I did it in the lab in London, which was involved in some of the gene therapy trials for X-linked RP, which of course you know much about, as well as other genetic conditions. And so there's very much hope on the horizon for this. However, at the moment, there is not a licensed product which can be used. It's still in trial. Um, I don't think that the gene therapy that's available or going to be available potentially is going to restore normal vision. And I'm going to make that the only negative thing I say in this webinar. But that is true. At the moment, what we're going for is sort of incremental improvements in function to make life easier for patients. However, RP does have a lot of other symptoms and manifestations. So, for instance, patients get some macular edema, which is swelling in the back of the eye, which can affect the vision even more on top of the genetic phenotype of the disease itself. And we can treat that. Patients can get bleeding in the eye. That's relatively rare, but it can happen. So we were mutually introduced by a patient of mine who does experience this, and again we can treat that. So there are certainly aspects of it that we can address and help.
Okay, so the next question is a little bit easier. When can I have new eyes?
I love this question. I actually get this question not infrequently in clinic. So I hear you. I hear you. Um, I just want to say, obviously, well, what I answer to my patients when they ask that question is, you can have new eyes as soon as you can have a new brain, because obviously the eye we can think of it as an extension of the brain, and therein lies the beauty of it, but also the problem in that connecting, for example, a new eyeball as a sort of a transplant or a donation, um, it's entirely feasible. However, it won't work because the nerves don't connect up. And that's why we can't take an eye and swap it round. But sort of half joking aside, I think as ophthalmologists, we like to think of every little bit of vision being precious, every little visual perception being useful. And we think very much in terms of maximizing the vision that everyone's got. And so I say don't diss your eyes. I know they don't work like an average eye will work, but it's got its own beauty and it's got its own function, and we've got to get the most we can out of it. And so I try, I mean, Allison's who introduced us, she really inspired me actually in her approach to her visual loss. And she really takes charge of the disease, um, being proactive about exploring technologies, exploring strategies, to use what you've got, being positive, talking to peers, talking to other patients who've got the same condition. There is lots of online forums, patient groups and hospitals, and I think there's a lot of strength in that peer support in terms of finding new ways of balancing things, of coping with visual loss. Um, and I think nowadays there's the opportunities are widening for doing this between technology, between accessibility. I mean, Paralympics have done wonders to inspire people to sort of get out there and do things. And you know more than I do about that, Rob. But that is my approach. I mean, don't think about my eyes are not working well, I want new ones. Think about my eyes are brilliant and let's see what I can do with them, with what I've got.
Yeah, and that's a really nice way to sort of summarize that, isn't it? You know, it would be great to have a magic wand and just ping, there you go, new eyes, but it's not
Yes.
like that. And
We're heading that way. We're working towards it. But while
yeah,
we're not there, let's try and stay positive about it. Let's try and do what we can
absolutely.
together to use what we have.
Yeah, and without giving away too much of the secret sauce that you're going to be talking about, there's loads of stuff going on in the background. Bionic eyes are of huge interest to a lot of people at the moment. So yeah, there's lots of stuff coming out. So yeah, we'll keep them peeled. So our third question is why is RP such a difficult condition to understand, but also people experience it so differently. So how can someone make sense of it?
Yeah. So it is very different in everyone's experience. And the answer really lies, well, partially in what I alluded to earlier, in that there's so many different genes and so many different mutations. And therefore that genotype, that genetic molecular background, is expressed differently in everyone. The phenotypes vary a lot. Um, and that gives you different, speed of onset of the disease, different rates of visual loss, different age of symptom development. And all of these things are related to the specific genetic defect, which is going to be your unique thing. Um, but also there's the effect of environment because it does affect how the disease is expressed. So, someone eating a super healthy diet and being really good with sun exposure, that's going to have an effect on retinal health, and it may preserve some function just a little bit longer potentially, um, which will have an impact. Um, there's other complicated genetic mechanisms which affect the way the genotype is expressed as well. So there's varying expression levels of even the same genetic issue. So that's the kind of the sort of the physical aspect, but also you've got to think about individual factors for this. Um, a person might have other eye problems which affect things. Um, they might have, for instance, a difference in their refractive error, so glasses wear contact lenses, but also the personal perception of the visual loss, because your perception and your awareness of things is very individual, and people are affected differently by different levels of problems. And so the key is to have a very individual approach in this. You have to listen to the problems the patient's having. You have to understand in what way it's affecting them specifically, because the solutions and the help we offer has to be tailored to the actual issues the patient's having. Um, so, for instance, in this, I find this fascinating actually in the gene therapy studies in the clinical trials that we conducted, we used a lot of what we call psychometric and psychophysical testing. So not just hard data outcomes in terms of visual acuity and in terms of contrast sensitivity and in terms of visual field, which of course are really important. But actually, a lot of the effect of gene therapy we see in these psychometric, psychophysical tests, things like navigation tasks. So, placing into a room with obstacles and seeing how efficiently and quickly and confidently they can navigate that environment. Real world tasks that actually reflect visual function more accurately than these hard, dry clinical tests that we have. So that shows you that is actually the sort of the important bit about it.
I've never done that. The hard clinical tests you're talking about, very familiar with. But yeah, that's really
Yeah,
interesting.
no, absolutely.
Ah, yeah. So many. See, every answer just drags up like five or six more questions, doesn't
There
it?
you
So
go. There you go.
yeah,
That's how we're doing this.
this might be an ongoing series. This is cool. So our next question is a bit of a tricky one for you to answer, I think, because RP,
Bring it on.
yeah, RP as I know it, and everyone that has it knows it. It's a very strange disease in that there's a lot of things we can't see, and there's a lot of things that we can see. And a question that I'm often asked by non-RP sufferers is, well, how come you can see some things sometimes and you can't see other things at the same time? And you know, what's going on? It's a bit of a weird one. Um, but especially for newly diagnosed RP sufferers and people that haven't lived through RP as long as we have, what would you say to that?
This is a very interesting question. I think I can attempt to answer it. I may not have the definitive answer, but I have got some ideas, I think. Um, so I mean the obvious sort of answer which we tend to give as ophthalmologists is to do with light levels. Illumination of your visual scene is hugely important for any condition that one of the main manifestations of which is a loss of contrast sensitivity. So patients with macular degeneration, for instance, are also very sensitive to this, cataracts as well. But RP also, light levels and illumination levels play a great role. So, for instance, if you're sat in a dimly lit room, you're not going to see as well as you are in a bright, sunshiny street. But also, in a bright, sunshiny street, you might get glare, you might get a sort of too much brightness, which almost overwhelms the sensation. So light levels are important. But also, the eye is a very complex mechanism, and vision doesn't rely on the eye itself. The eye is just the start. Um, there's some integration and processing that happens in the retina of the visual signals, and then the signals they need to be sent down the nerves into the brain, where a lot more processing takes place. And the brain has to make sense of what it sees. And so things that affect brain processing will also play a part in how much you see, because you ultimately see with your brain rather than your eyes. That's how you understand the information that you see. Um, and so if you're a bit tired, that might have an effect. If you've had a glass of wine, that might have an effect. It's all a system that plays in tune, and needs to all work perfectly to produce the image that we've got. Um, a fascinating condition, which is, quite unpleasant for sufferers that you may or may not have heard of, Charles Bonnet syndrome. I find it very interesting, but that's a prime example of this where patients who've got poor eyesight, their brain well essentially gets bored. It's not getting enough visual stimuli, and so it says, well, I must be seeing something, and the brain starts to produce images without you seeing those images. And patients report seeing, people and objects and animals and images when they don't exist. And patients get very concerned. They think that it's a hallucination, there's something wrong, but it's just the brain trying to see. And so it starts to make things up. And so this system altogether is a very finely tuned mechanism. And I think that's one of the answers to this. Regarding the varying levels of function. And actually, going back to Allison, who introduced us, something else she said to me recently harps back to this. In what she When she came to clinic one time, we were taking some wide field photos of her retina, and often we need to lift the upper eyelid to take the picture so that the eyelashes don't get in the way of the camera. And when the technician lifted her eyelid, she said, "Oh my goodness, I can suddenly see so much better." And I said, "Really?" And she said, "Well, yes, because I mean the eyelids aren't covering the pupil, so it's not like it's limiting your vision, and it's not like your acuity has gotten sharper. It's just that I feel there's so much more light entering my eyes. I have a different perception of the world uh, when doing that." And so, this was quite revolutionary to her. And she went out and she tested it. She kept lifting her own eyelids and saying, "I'm enjoying this much. I need to have an eyelid lift in order to have this permanent effect." Um, which, there we are. It's not going to affect how much function she gets out of her retina, but it's going to affect her perception of the world for the better.
So why is it? So I'm going to drill you down a bit harder on this one. So what? How is it that in the same light, sometimes you can see stuff and sometimes you can't see stuff?
Well, in RP, the actual genetic problem is with the actual photoreceptor cells usually, the actual little cells in the retina that pick up the light. And they're a very active, they're a very active cell. They're very metabolically active. In fact, the retina is the gram per gram is the most metabolically active part of the body. It has the highest oxygen requirement per weight. And so you could conceivably say, well, look, these cells are slightly impaired, and therefore they're working already on the very threshold of sort of capabilities. And perhaps one moment they're falling below that threshold, and another moment they're rising above. Because it's a finding, because when you have a reserve, when you have a fully working cell and you have a reserve of function, those perturbations are not so noticeable. But when you're right on the threshold, perhaps they are very noticeable and perhaps they do make a real world difference. When doing my research as well, something we did was a technique called adaptive optics, which is a very clever thing that you need a physicist to explain how it works. But it uses a laser microscope, a very complex laser microscope, which is custom built, to image photoreceptors in vivo. So in a living patient sitting on the microscope, you can see their individual cone and rod cells working. Yeah, so the technique of adaptive optics is amazing. You see changes in these photoreceptor cells visit to visit. So, for example, you take a picture um, or a video, actually, what we did, we took videos of patient's retina, the little individual cells in it doing their thing. And then a few months later, you take a picture of the same cells and you can say, look, there's that cell and there's this one. And with RP patients, as the individual cells slowly die away, you can see one of them disappear. And what the others do is they kind of move into position and they get a bit larger and they try to compensate for the loss. You see this happening. And so, of course, that might be part of the mechanism as well. Just in real time, you've got this cell movement, this cell change, transformation, which can potentially affect your visual perception.
That's fascinating stuff. I said you're pulling up a whole new list of questions for the next one. Honestly,
The more you answer, the more questions you have.
yeah, absolutely. It's astonishing, isn't it? But yeah. Do those videos ever get put out anywhere? Can normal people like me go and see them somewhere?
The
Um,
AO images?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Google Adaptive Optics Retina.
yeah,
And you can see, so our team was the UCL team, and they published a number of papers with the images from our group.
yeah.
Um,
Wow. Well, that's great because Jan has sent me lots and lots of links, which I'll be putting in the video description. So maybe we could stick one of those in there as well, because that would be fascinating to go and watch. So now we've got a really juicy question for you. So rather than curing the genetic problems with RP, the mutations and the issues, will there ever be a time when there will be an eye or retina transplant available, which might be, which one would be easier? Which one will come first, do you think?
Love this one too. As a retinal surgeon, that would be very exciting for me to be able to transplant retinas. Um, there already are retinal transplants. It's been done. However, it doesn't achieve very much vision-wise. The retinal transplants have already been tried, and it's been done in macular degeneration patients, where you move one part of the retina, and also the other layers of the eye, into a different area to try to get it to work. Um, it doesn't have great success, for the same reason as I mentioned before. The nerve connections don't form properly. The retina is essentially an extension of the brain. It's nerve tissue. And if you damage a nerve, say in your arm, it'll grow back eventually. It's slow, but it'll regenerate eventually. But the central nervous system, the brain, the eyes, the spinal cord, they don't join up very well. And so you don't get that function out of it, even if you can keep it alive in the new area. Um, so at the moment, we're not at the stage where we can transplant retina usefully. But where are we at the moment with this? Well, um, I don't think we'll have this soon. But two areas are sort of trying to work on this. First of all, the artificial eyes. So technology is moving in leaps and bounds. There are some artificial eyes out there, artificial retinas, that have been trialed, and actually, some of them have had quite a lot of success, sort of relatively speaking. They're suitable for certain types of visual loss, so certain causes of visual loss, because they usually use the existing signaling channels, so the nerve and the brain channels, and they're just designed for people who've lost retinal function. They have had some good results, but there are issues with them. They're quite technically challenging to use, and also they, at the moment, deliver a very small area of vision. So literally a few pixels, or a few tens of pixels or hundreds of pixels. So you have to, so it's more than tunnel vision. It's sort of very pinpoint vision that people get out of them. But as technology moves on, I have no doubt that we'll have better solutions on that front. And the other front that we're working on research-wise is stem cells. Um, and it's the other exciting sort of area in every part of medicine. Now, stem cell research in eyes and in retina is a league behind the gene therapy. Um, there's active work going on, but we haven't gotten to the stage where we can get the stem cells to do what we want and to create new retinas. But I think biologically speaking, that will be the solution when we get there. I think practically decades, probably realistically for that one.
Okay. So put you on the spot, which one's going to come first? Cure for RP or a sort of replacement eye?
I think cure for RP.
Do you
If
think
I was to
so?
bet between the two, I think so. I think the gene therapy is sufficiently advanced to give us a realistic hope of significant improvement in vision in our lifetime, but I'm less sure about the new eyes
Yeah.
in that time frame.
Because the interesting thing is that there are already certain treatments available for certain types of RP, aren't there? It's just like
There,
a global cure for the whole thing that we don't have yet.
yeah, there are certainly symptomatic treatments. There are certainly things, like I said, we can address aspects of it which go wrong. And there are certainly several gene therapy trials for certain genetic defects. So the XLRP, the X-linked RPGRP, there are several trials going on, and other inherited retinal disease. And there is, in fact, you may know, there's one licensed retinal genetic um, solution, Luxturna, for another type of inherited disorder which has been released and is available. But RP is coming. I sincerely believe it is coming in the future.
Yeah, hopefully the near future. That would be good. That would be cool. Okay, last question is what technologies are available to help maximize people's remaining vision and help them deal with their vision loss?
So this is the practical one. And I'm very excited about these things. I think this is all moving at such great pace that anything I say will, there'll be more out there almost in a week. Um, the simplest things, which, if you've had any discussion with vision support officers or clinic liaison officers, and the things that low vision clinics do will be the magnifiers and the lighting implements, which we've got to just kind of maximize that environment for best sight, and using parts of the retina that still work to kind of to bring images into better focus. But more so almost are all the apps that are available. I think when I was kind of just starting out in the field, 10 years ago or so, there was not that much around. It was very early, but it was still very exciting. And now there's a host of them. I just did a search earlier today, and there were a couple of new things I hadn't heard of before. Um, so the app's looking at object recognition and object description, face recognition apps, so you can scan the room and they'll tell you, who's there. Ones that will read out text from letters that are printed too small or articles. And there's the talking apps with actual live assistants, so you've got somebody on the other end who helps you navigate an environment, which I think is a great idea. Obviously these are all designed for patients with quite severe visual loss, but they can often be kind of life-changing, allowing them to come out of the house with more confidence. Um, there's the voice assistants we've got, which most of us will use these days, the Alexas and the Siris, who will do voice control for various functions around the house and lights and everything. And yeah, I mean, uh, concerns about privacy aside, I think they can be very helpful for everyone, but in particular for patients with visual loss, because they can just allow you to do a lot more all of a sudden. Audiobooks. I mean, I listen to audiobooks on my way to work, but it sort of opens up that whole wonderful literature world when you couldn't access a standard book to read. And the hot topic of the day, the AI, artificial intelligence, which seems to be infiltrating every area of our lives now. So we won't think about sort of robots taking over the world just yet. I'll try not to worry about that, but I think AI has a huge role to play. And there's a lot of focus now in technology, on predictive things, and on using an AI to develop strategies, which I'm sure will create a whole host of uh, new apps and devices and opportunities. Again, you probably know more than I on this. We were just talking about some interesting goggles that you've come across.
Yeah, there's lots of cool stuff happening. Yeah, which is what I love about being connected to so many other people with RP. It's that everybody is looking all the time for different things and bringing it into the mainstream. And it's like, wow, this
And
is
everybody can share ideas and help
yeah,
develop them. And yeah, I think it's very exciting.
absolutely. And it's one of the things that I talk about all the time is, whether you love it or hate it, being connected to groups of people that are also along the same journey that you are, or, just starting out way down the line, it's so helpful to hear other people and see what other people are doing. Um, yeah, it's incredible. But yeah, I've got so many more questions, but we are going to
We can
leave.
meet again, Rob. We can
Yeah,
meet
we
again.
will. We will. So obviously, thank you very much for everything today. We are going to be putting all of your links in the video description. So if you want to connect with Miss Jen, then you can do. We will also find some of those cool videos from the microscopes because I'll be fascinated to look at that as well. And obviously, if you haven't subscribed to my Blind Focus with Rob Sears YouTube channel, please subscribe so that you don't miss our next episode with Miss Jen.
Thank you very much, Rob. I'll see you again.
Thank you.